In this week's video, we're going to throw another one of my favorite shapes, and that is a bowl, a larger bowl. And this is very similar to throwing the platters, but I find this one a little easier. We're going to use 4 pounds, and we're going to finish the video off with getting some interesting textures on the outside. So let's go ahead and get started. Got my 4-pound ball, and let's go ahead and follow the same intro steps for throwing. Roll it to get a point on the bottom, put it in the center, and get it stuck. And first step, as always, seal the edge, push it down, and then cone up and down until it's centered. If you want to see more ceramic videos, don't forget to like and subscribe. That way it helps grow the channel, and you'll be able to see these videos as they're released every week. Get rid of the skirt when we cone down, and cone. So as I cone, I'm driving the clay away from my body, and I'm squeezing with my right hand as well at the base to prevent that outside from getting a little wobbly. All right, we got the piece nice and centered. We're going to go ahead and dig our well, and that's with our thumb sideways like in the previous video, and then using slip when possible to reduce the amount of water needed. And I'm going to go a little thicker than 1/2 inch. Since this is a larger bowl, I would like a larger foot to match. So to get my depth set, and now I am ready to open the well. Now I'm ready to open the well, and in my previous videos I showed how to open the well with your hands at midnight, moving your thumbs to your pointer fingers. This is another variation that I like doing, and what this is I'm putting my left hand in and I'm squeezing the clay this direction to open the well, and as soon as I feel like it's wide enough, I then engage with my right to apply pressure at the base, and I pull. So I combine the opening step with my first pull. So it looks something like this. So I'm squeezing the clay at the inside, I'm pulling it towards my right hand, which is around 4 o'clock. Right here it seems like it's a good width, and then I go ahead and I do a pull, and all that clay that was opening and starting to flare out, I then pull up to make it cylindrical. So that is my first pull, and then I'm going to go ahead and then I just need to reset my inside corner because it got a little too rounded. And so my next pull, I'm going to continue that same motion where I squeeze, pinch, and pull up, and my sponge in my right hand helps guide it. And so you can do this as many times as you can, as long as your hands can reach the inside bottom. Okay, that's my second pull. Release the pressure as I rise. And then, because it's going to be a wide bowl, I'm going to leave the rim a little thicker. And in other throwing videos, you may have seen people throw the pieces out and wide as they pull. Now, when you're beginning to throw larger pieces, that's one thing I don't recommend, because as you pull out and wide, the clay walls tend to get pretty thin. And if you pull out too much, the clay can become too wide and then it can collapse on itself. So I recommend when you're first starting to throw these larger bowls, throw vertically up to make a cylinder and then shape. It takes a little more steps, but overall I think it's a little easier to tackle. Okay, my next pull, before I start the next one, I'm going to color this in just a tad bit because I don't want it too wide yet. And I'm going to go ahead and then complete my next pull. So now I'm going back to traditional pulls. I want to get rid of that skirt, so that way I have a little area for my right hand to push in. And so regular pulls, just remember, left hand in, right hand out, push in, and pull up. They should be offset as you pull. And if you push in first and then push out, that still works. So I'm going to push out the inside, and I want the bottom a little thinner for these bowls. And I'm going to push in on the outside, and then I'm going to go ahead and start my pull. And then just remember, as you rise, feel the clay thickness. If it thins out on you, release the pressure, and at the very top it should be little to no pressure. And then you can compress the top with your thumb going down. Okay, let's do one more pull, and then we'll go ahead and start shaping. So push in, push out, and then pull. Now, since this is my last pull that I'm going to do, I can start letting it flare out a little bit, and that's something that you guys can do as well as you get used to making these larger shapes. and then of course compress at the top. I'm actually going to do one more pull because the bottom's still a little on the thicker side. So push in, push out, and then like I said in my last pull, I can let this flare out a little bit in preparation for the stretch of this bowl. The top I'm going to leave because I don't want to thin that out. Okay, and then compress. All right, so I'm ready to shape. And just an overview of shaping. Normally, your left hand is on the inside, your right hand is on the outside. You push out where you want the clay to expand, and then your right hand is either supporting up below or above, and then you slowly lift your hands like it's a pull. You can also use the rib to cover more surface area, and this allows you to be a little more aggressive to shape. And you may have seen in previous videos using a wooden spoon, and this is my preferred method when it comes to shaping larger pieces and smaller pieces, for bowls anyway, because I have a lot of control with this. So I'm going to go ahead and use this for my initial shaping. So I'm going to get it wet. And when we do this bowl is about 6 inches tall so far and about 7 inches wide. And it's going to shrink a little bit in height and it's going to grow in width. So as I shape, I got to make sure not to go too fast or this can come collapsing down. So when using the rice paddle, I like holding it like a pencil for the initial shape, and my right hand is still out there to support. When you are learning how to use the rice paddle, you can hold it in your hands like a baseball bat and then push out and then lift up. So initially I'm going to hold it like this, spin the wheel. I'm going to focus the pressure at the bottom, and you'll start seeing the clay expand around the tool. So this is where the tool's touching, and then I slowly start lifting it up to transfer that shape all the way to the top. And pardon the airplane noise. So that's shaping with the rice paddle. Now, if you don't have a rice paddle, you can use your fingers, and that looks something like this. So I get my fingers wet, apply pressure right here, and this is where my inside hand is, and this is how my hand looks when I shape. So my fingertips are touching the clay, and I'm applying pressure right here, and then I slowly start lifting my hands. My right hand is just there as a guide in case I push it out a little unevenly. And your fingers do work, but the clay can become sticky, and then your fingers can start skipping, and it just takes a little longer. So if you do have these wooden tools available, I highly recommend it. It'll make your life a lot easier when it comes to shaping bigger pieces. And then lastly, I'll show you the rib. So I'm going to use this curved side here to apply pressure, and it's going to go into the clay wall, stretch it out, and I slowly lift it up. And one thing to remember, you don't want it perpendicular to the curve, you want to angle it towards you. So not straight against the clay wall like that, you tilt it towards your body. So I'm going to start at the bottom, apply pressure here. You can start seeing the bulge form, and then I slowly start lifting the tool up until I get to the very top. At the top, I start stretching it out a little more, leave it there for a few seconds, let the clay expand, and then I release. So as I shape, and as you shape, you just got to be mindful of this curve. If this starts becoming more of a 45-degree angle, your whole piece can collapse because this is too wide for the clay to handle. So it's really good practice to start shaping the top once this becomes a little wider before you start pushing this out anymore. So I'm going to go back to my rice paddle, and then I like the back of the paddle facing me, and I angle it towards me. And I'm going to focus up here to bring this top part a little wider. All right, so now I have this big dome. It's a very tall bowl, not very wide. So sometimes when you start shaping from the bottom and you expand this belly out further than the width, this top gets kind of wonky. So what I like doing is once my width at the top is the widest, you can kind of flare this out a little more to stretch that section. Support it with your outside hand as always. And then you can start shaping slightly below it. So I'm not going to go to the bottom here yet because I don't want to push this too far out. So I'm going to start right here, I'll apply pressure, and then I'm going to start stretching the clay to make it match that new width I formed a little earlier. So really supporting the rim because I don't want the rim to open up and get too wonky. Okay. And now at the rim I can actually flare that out to do the same steps I did prior and getting ready for the next open. My rim is starting to do this little kind of hot dog shape. These edges are wider, and so I'm going to compress that. And so it's always good to compress your rim every once in a while. And if I were to not compress it now, that indent in the center would have gotten deeper and deeper. So always good practice to compress your rim and round it out whenever you can. And then for these bowls, you can stop shaping whenever you're satisfied, but I want this a little bigger so I can hold more things. So now I'm going to start shaping right here on the inside, apply pressure. I'm going to work my way upwards to kind of match the overall shape for the entire piece. And it's turning a little straighter, which is fine because I can add more curve once this top section stretches out. So you can make platters the same way with the rice paddle or your rib just by shaping the inside, just like the previous video. So now I'm going to start working on this bottom section, getting this a little more flared out. And my outside hand is actually supporting it because I don't want this to collapse on me. And then here I'm going to go ahead and start working all the way up. And now I'm getting it more volume. And you can see that my clay is getting a little more wobbly. And initially when I shaped my fingers, that made this bottom section a little lopsided. Easy way to fix this wobble. You can take a metal rib, you can flex it so it contours to the shape, and just apply pressure where it looks a little uneven. And this kind of acts as a guide, and it kind of similar to trimming where you're pushing the clay in where it's uneven. If you want to take it a step further, you can use that same tool, the same rib, and you can introduce, in this case I'm using the rib, and you can shape together by compressing and lifting up. So I'm going to add a little more roundness to the bottom, and to support it I'm going to use the metal rib, and that's going to help center anything that may be off. And then as I see the clay even out and stretch, I'll start bringing it up to even out the entire clay wall until I get to the very top. So that is another way to shape, and that kind of helps compress the clay if you feel like it's getting a little uneven. Almost got the shape. I'm going to go one more push, get it out a little further, and then I can add my texture, and then our bowl is done. So here we go. We'll try one more shaping. It's the same thing, push it out, and just follow. So my outside hand with the rib is having very, very light pressure, not too much. Alright, so to clean up the inside, I'm going to use the rice paddle, and all I'm doing is just compressing down the clay in the center, kind of like trimming, to even out the clay. Now I'm not going deeper, I'm just kind of flattening it out. And then this weird bump transition, I'm going to push down. And I want to feel the outside to where my base ends. So this is where my base ends, and this is where the wall starts going out. So I can push down here to compress the clay. So I can start applying pressure here, and my right hand is on the outside just in case, and you can apply pressure down to clean it up. If you want something a little more aggressive, you can take the metal rib, and then you can actually scrape and shave away clay from the inside, kind of like trimming, but this takes just little increments off at a time. Now right here, this transition where my middle finger is where the clay wall starts bumping out. So I have to be very careful not to apply too much pressure there, or I'm going to change the outside shape. And if I apply too much, I can actually cause the whole piece to come collapsing down on me. So right there, I'm going to soften the texture, get that transition a little more even, and then finally finish it off with some water to smooth. And if this inside really bothers me, after it dries out, I can always take a trimming tool and even it out even more. All right, now I'm going to even out the rim, and it doesn't feel like it rises and falls, so I'm just going to go ahead, add some water, and then at this stage, if I was done and my bowl was finished, I can just take the chamois and just drape it over the top and apply very light pressure to fully round it, and this removes any sharp edges, it compresses the rim, and it just makes it nice and rounded, which will allow it to accept more glaze and be less prone to chipping. So I'm going to change it to the last view to see the final outside shape. All right, this bowl is more or less done. I just need to create a groove at the base and wire it off. So the final dimensions that we have are about 10.5 wide by a little more than 5 inches tall. And this is a 4-pound ball. Now, like I said in the beginning of the video, I'm going to throw in some texture to make it a little more interesting. And this texture is totally optional, and sometimes the texture makes the piece look more weird. So do it with discretion. Now, when I do the texture, when I throw smaller bowls, I do it with my finger inside, apply pressure, and I raise it up and down. But for a larger piece like this, I can't really push out. So instead, I'm going to be using a metal rib, and this corner of the metal rib right here, to apply pressure in to gouge and then lift up and down. My inside hand's just going to be there for support so I don't push too hard. And then if the shape changes too dramatically, I can always push it out. Now, a few things when you do this, you want to make sure your bowl is not too wet, because this can actually make the whole thing collapse. So just be very mindful of doing this. And if you want to try this out, I recommend trying it out on a smaller piece to get a feel for the way this thing moves before you attempt it on something that's larger that you're a little more attached to. So the way I'm going to do this, my inside hand is going to support, my outside hand is going to apply pressure with this one point. I'm going to apply pressure, and I'm just going to slowly bring it up and down until I kind of undulate various lines all the way to the top. And that may change the height of your piece, so I may need to cut that off before. Yeah, so here we go. Start applying pressure. So a nice slow pressure. And just kind of rise and fall. Crisscross the zigzag lines. And stop right there. Okay. And my inside got a little weird textured, so I'm going to go back and use the rice paddle just to push out a little bit of it. So the texture more or less is there, but the inside indents are a little less noticeable. Now you don't need to do this. Sometimes this kind of counteracts the texture that you just threw in, so just be careful. And right there, I got my texture. I would clean up all of those lines later on, and that would be at the trimming stage. Last thing, I'm just going to want to throw in a little water just to smooth out this inside. Let's go ahead and cut it off. So create the groove at the base. This allows the needle to get into that groove and cut directly on the bat and not lift up. And when I cut off something this large and this thin, I usually spin the wheel slowly, and then I pull the needle to not warp the rim too much. Okay, the rim did warp a little, so I'm just going to spin the wheel. You can kind of see it when the wheel's spinning faster. I'm going to spin the wheel and then just support the rim. And there we go. Got my finished bowl. If you want to see more ceramic videos, don't forget to like and subscribe. That way it helps grow the channel, and you'll be able to see these videos as they're released every week. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.